Unfortunately, the staff report and I believe the notice of appeal said that this hearing was going to be limited to participants that participated below at the HRB level. But state statute, specifically 197.763 sub 7, says that when new evidence is allowed into the record, which it should be, that any party can participate. So really, it's error to not allow new evidence and error not to allow new people to testify. And I'm just going to make my record. I understand that some of the evidence may be stricken in some of what I said. So I'll try and identify what is in the record and what is not as I'm speaking. So a couple years ago, when this whole issue got started, there were only a few maps that had been identified at the time showing this area as designated parkland. In the 1991 Parks Master Plan and the 1999 Parks Master Plan and the 2004 Comprehensive Plan. And at the time, the City Commission adopted Resolution 1529, essentially, among other things, saying that, well, yes, those documents show this area as parkland, but that was an error. That was a mistake. This area was never intended to be parkland. And in the almost 3 years since then, through litigation and other matters, a lot more evidence has surfaced about the history of that parkland. And it's very clear that it was no mistake that the area was shown as parkland on the Parks Master Plan. I understand you'll object to this because it's not in the record before the HRB, but it's a 1929 municipal report map.
I object to your inclusion of this map in the record, but...
Thank you, Ms. Ricker. This is from an official city report, 1929, labeling the area as Waterboard Park. A similar map was generated for the city reports we could find.
Is this in the record?
This is also not in the record, and I understand you object to it. From 1933, 1934, 1936, 1937, and 38, and a few other years that we've since found, shows the area, including the expansion area, is Waterboard Park.
Let me be clear, Mr. Buss. I'm not going to consider any of these.
That's clear to me, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
In 1935, the city commissioned a survey. It's the survey that Mr. Combs attempted to get into evidence. And it's labeled Waterboard Park. This has been recorded with the county recorder's office. And I'll just hand out copies, which I know will be objected to. There you go. And I'll hand one to the city.
Thanks. This is new evidence, correct?
This is new evidence.
Well, I'm not going to look.
Again, very clearly, the entire area proposed for expansion is labeled Waterboard Park, commissioned by the city. In 1950, again, this is new evidence, and I understand the city objects to it. The very first known land use plan for Oregon City shows the entire area as parkland under the key. And this is in the record, so there shouldn't be any objection to it that I would anticipate. It's the 1952 proposed recreation center in Waterboard Park, and it shows the expansion area clearly labeled as parkland. That was adopted via resolution by the City Commission and the Planning Commission. Also new evidence that I understand the city objects to is a resolution from 1948 where the city was leasing part of the Armory area to the state. In the resolution, it says that they're leasing a portion of Waterboard Park in Oregon City, Clackamas County, described as follows, and it gives a legal description of the Armory area. Also new evidence that I understand is objected to, 1949 deed to the state for the Armory area, and the legal description describing the entire area as Waterboard Park. and you've seen this before, and it is in the record, the 1975 comprehensive plan, consistent with all these plans I've just shown you, shows the area as parkland. This is also in evidence, the 1991 Parks Master Plan, consistent, shows the area as parkland. Also in evidence, the 1999 Parks Master Plan, again, consistently shows the proposed expansion area as within parkland. This is new evidence that I know will be objected to. But these are photos taken by a McLaughlin neighborhood resident within the last few years. These are within the proposed expansion area, and it shows the mature trees, the oak trees, rock outcroppings, the natural area that's still there in the expansion area that will no longer be accessible to the public if this moves forward. And the reason I bring up these exhibits is that several years ago when the City Commission passed Resolution 1529, saying that it was a mistake to label that area as parkland, from the past 108 years, the evidence is clear. It's always been labeled parkland and considered parkland by the city, by its officials, by the public. Another issue, and this was brought up in the appeal before the HRB, is that under state statute, if a property owner issues a revocation of consent for landmark designation application, then no demolition permit can be issued for 6 months after that revocation occurs. Now, I'm referring to the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association's March 2017 application for historic designation of the Campadera buildings, which has yet to get a hearing on the merits. And anyway, as you know, the city manager issued a letter revoking consent.
Is this in the record?
I believe this is in the record.
This is in the record.
And although the Neighborhood Association disputes the validity of that revocation of consent by the city manager, if in fact it was effective, that 180 days ran after the HRB finalized the approval of this application, so it occurred too early under state statute. I'm not going to go over all of the issues for appeal set out in, I believe, 24-page notice of appeal that I filed on behalf of the Neighborhood Association, but the main point I wanted to highlight from that appeal is that the Historic Review Board is not just sitting in a capacity of design review and compatibility for an application like this. The Oregon City Code, to the contrary, is very clear. In this kind of situation, the Historic Review Board is actually sitting more like a planning commission. It's not just reviewing the issue of design compatibility. The criteria for the application include all provisions of the comprehensive plan that are germane in any way to the application. And we have a long comprehensive plan, and it addresses goals, Goal 5 resources, Goal 8 resources, among other things. And the HRB made findings on none of those, simply saying we're limiting our review to historic design review. But that's not what the code says. It says they have to do more. This is new evidence that I acknowledge the city will object to, but the development of longtime municipal parkland is a disturbing trend in the state of Oregon. It's not just happening in Oregon City. A few other examples recently that I'm aware of are the city of Hood River. They are in the process of rezoning Morrison Park, which has been city park for almost as long as Waterboard Park has in Oregon City. And they're turning it from natural area, frisbee golf, into housing. Another situation in the past few years was in the city of Bend. I think it's called Troy Field, a longtime park for the community, being considered for a hotel development. And these are symptoms of a larger regional problem, which is our growth, our population, which is becoming more and more dense all the time, and the pressure on our public lands is getting more and more intense. And I encourage you, on behalf of the Neighborhood Association, to stop, resist the temptation to allow this long time open space and park to be an easy route out to save money in the short term, because once we lose parkland, we will never get it back. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I've got some of these exhibits that I know are objected to as new evidence that I'm going to hand to the city recorder on a flash drive.
So I think before we move on, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Let us stretch our legs a little bit, because this is obviously going to take substantial more time. So we're going to take 5 minutes. So we will resume the public hearing, and I'll ask for the applicant to come up.
Brought you guys a bag of junk.
All of which is in the record, right?
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Good evening. My name is Martin Montalvo. I'm the operations manager for Oregon City Public Works, and I am the applicant for this project manager with me.
Hold on, Martin.
Yes.
So we need to reset the clock to 15 minutes, please.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to just. It only does it in 30-minute increments. I'm sorry. So I'm gonna have to wait. I know.
Okay, knock it off.
Oh, good. Feels all right. We can start. There it is.
All right, go ahead.
Again, my name is Martin Montalvo. I'm the operations manager for Oregon City Public Works. I'm the project manager for the proposed project before you this evening. With me is
David Hyman, principal with Decca Architecture from Portland.
So we're going to present to you what we presented to HRB previously on the record from our meeting with them and what we presented at that time. Before I start, I do want to go over a few objections that we have to the materials that were presented earlier by the speakers. Particularly, Mr. Cohn presented 3 items: his statement regarding scale, his statement regarding the map that was provided from 1938, I believe, and then also the 2002 district survey. Those are all new items on the record, and formally, on behalf of the city as the applicant, will be objecting to those admitted to the record. I'll also be objecting to the majority of the content within Mr. Buss's presentation. As he's admitted himself, the majority of those items are new to the record, and we'll formally file our objection to them being submitted. With that, we have a PowerPoint for you. If we can, city recorder. We've got a PowerPoint that we'd like to go through with you, kind of outlining what we're proposing with this project. As you know, we have an approved 2009 master plan that was the starting point for this discussion. And we'll wait for this to start here.
Yep.
And so the first slide you see here is the 2009 master plan, which David was instrumental in helping us with. One of the things that we started this revision to this project for this modernization was meeting with some members of the community, 3 members of the McLaughlin neighborhood that worked with us, and taking a look at the objections that were presented from the previous plan set and figuring out what concessions could be made to try and address several of those concessions. So I'll let David detail to you what the major design changes were between the 2009 and the 2017 master plan.
Well, one of the big changes is the program changed somewhat. Originally, we were going to house a number of different departments from Public Works, and is this the?
Yeah, left and right.
I mean, a number of different departments from Public Works in one office building, and that building was proposed to be on the ground, on the lower level. So it was a 4-story building that kind of bridged the 2 levels with an elevator. Since then, we've changed the program to where it will be only the operations department and not include those other Public Works departments. So that reduced the overall scale of the project from about 67,000 to 53,000 square feet. In addition, after a number of discussions with neighbors and the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, we also made a number of other changes, such as in order to avoid large truck traffic to the upper level, we moved most, if not all, of the large truck parking to the lower level. Only small vehicles, for the most part, would be parked on the upper level. There would still be some access of large vehicles now and then, but the bulk of the traffic would be on the lower level for large trucks. We also moved the offices from the 4-story building up to a 2-story building on the upper level, about 15,000 square feet. The rock outcropping, which we had proposed originally to be leveled, we are going to preserve. We've moved bins away from the bluff because we heard from neighbors that there was some rockfall associated with that. And we went to great lengths to try to work within the historic character, a modern interpretation, but within the historic character of the McLaughlin Conservation District. We're also going to be using the armory for the city fleet maintenance shop, which was originally in 2009 proposed as a separate new building.
Okay.
You want me to keep going?
Go ahead.
So this is a little more detailed view of that. You can see the 2-story office building here, which is bridged between the 2 levels by an elevator so that staff can move up and down between those levels. There's tool storage building over here. The fleet shop, as I said, was over here, is now moved to the armory building, which they're in the process of acquiring. And then there's a variety of different covered and indoor parking structures on this upper level. So again, just to reiterate, this is the subject area, the phase 1 area of the project. So these are the buildings we're considering in the detailed development plan.
So on this slide, I'll also add that the limits of the project are within the recognized individual lot that's recognized as the Public Works Operations Facility. On the left-hand side, you'll also notice that there is the denotation for a improved trail that'll be coming from Center Street and connecting into Waterboard Park proper. That is outside of the gated area. So that is something that we had committed to in the original 2009 plan, and it's something that we're still committed to within this revision. I'll also point out that from John Adams Street, as you're entering Waterboard Park proper into the old Waterboard Park Road, there's currently no dedicated parking for that facility. People that utilize the parking space in front of the armory, that's not dedicated for Waterboard Park access, that's armory parking. So we'll be dedicating parking space outside of the gated perimeter for park access. And there will be no prohibition of access from John Adams Street into the Waterboard Park proper. So for the remainder of the presentation, we're going to be focusing on phase 1 of the project, which will bring us to the next slide.
Let me ask a quick question first, Martin. So Promontory Road, as it comes down the hill, will still be able to be accessed by those?
So spatially in relation to this, Promontory and Creed, which is the recognized overlook, is right about where Commissioner Ide's head is. So congratulations. Just to give you some spatial relationship. Yeah. So that's about where it is. The access to the overlook via, the roads in the upper portion of the city, as well as access through Waterboard Park Road, won't be limited in any way.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Where are we at?
So this is, I'll just briefly discuss some high points here. This is a landscape plan, and it just shows, essentially we're maintaining the rock outcropping and all of the white oak trees that are healthy around this area here and along the bluff. There are quite a few that have either died or decaying. We'll be replacing those one for one with on-site with white oak seedlings or white oak trees that meet the caliper of the code. There's also a number of stormwater planters throughout the site and some landscape around this stormwater swale that's proposed for this area right here.
So we're going into phasing. As I mentioned earlier, the primary portions of this discussion are going to speak to phase 1 of the project, which is consisting of the upper yard, The building's in the upper yard. The only component of Phase 1 that touches into the Center Street lower sections is the construction of the elevator and the demolition of 2 parking canopies that we have there, parking structures that would have to be removed in order to construct the elevator. So this will give you a general overview of the location. You want to speak to this one?
This is a section cut through the site, so you can see the different levels between the lower and upper level. You can see the elevator right here that bridges it. This is the building that we were just looking at that Martin was talking about. But again, this is the upper level in the Phase 1 part of the project. This is the 2-story office building. As you can see, it's set back 47 feet from the bluff, so actually you can see some sight lines and view angles from down below, and it's actually minimized in not only by its scale and its height, but also because of the trees that will be in front of it. So it will not be a very a prominent view from below the bluff. These are some of the principles that we used in designing the building that respect the guidelines of the historic district. Just to point out some of them, these are buildings that are actually used in the design guidelines as examples to be able to, for architects to look at and be able to emulate and adhere to some of these principles. These are historic buildings, and I think the intent of the code is to produce a building that fits into a modern context, but maintains some of those elements that relate it to its historic contents. For instance, a base, a middle, and a top is a very historic interpretation of historic buildings that we've used. There's also a belt cornice line along here, which you can also see in some of these other buildings that they're using as examples. There's vertical windows, which are historically proportioned windows. They emphasize entries with large glass areas, storefront glazing. So this is the main entry and lobby to the building, and a variety of materials so that you've got CMU, which is concrete masonry units on the ground level, which is kind of the durable layer of the building, and then a metal panel on the upper area of the building. Flat roof, very similar to these. So those are some of the main principles that we used in making our argument that this building, in relating it to the historic character of the district.
And we should say that we use the guidelines for the commercial district. The appellate feels that the residential guidelines are more appropriate. It was our interpretation, and the HRB agreed in the initial findings, that using the guidelines for a commercial district were more appropriate for the industrial use as it's currently being used.
And these are just some renderings of the building. As you can kind of see, as you're working your way around the building, you can see the distribution of materials, the glazing, the proportions, the cornice lines. It's a very articulated building, so I think that actually brings the scale of the building down in many ways. This is a view of the front of the building as you enter the building with the CMU on the ground level and landscape in front. So the materials themselves, and Martin has brought examples, and we submitted those as part of our HRB review, are a mixture of ground face CMU, which is the concrete masonry units, of a variety of different colors. They're neutral colors, they're warm earth tone colors, and we feel that those are compatible with the guidelines, even though there is a section in the code that says it discourages the use of concrete block. I think that's really referring to a type of block that is very different than what this has evolved here. They're also using different proportions. It's not all just the typical 8x16 block. It's a mixture of different block sizes, different colors, different patterns. It's an ashlar pattern. So it's a very richly textured one that I think meets the intent of the code. And it's also a very durable material.
So within the record, you also have items that were submitted by Mr. Premor regarding the actual design component. We're trying to attempt to answer several of those through this presentation. There are several objections that were raised that you can see are formal responses within our response matrix that don't apply to phase 1 of the project. So for those, we won't bring them up item for item for the sake of expediency, but they are within the record as to what our formal responses are. The objection to the use of the CMU, we're explaining to you our rationale as to why we think what we're proposing is appropriate. And we're also pointing out that the HRB did agree with our proposal and found that it was historically appropriate for the commercial district use.
Good.
You have anything else?
No, I think that's it.
That's it. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I have one. Is the walkway that goes over to the elevator, is that enclosed?
Could you go back to slide 3, I believe it was. So no, if you take a look what we've presented here, the walkway starts on Center Street, will come up along the rock face on a new staircase that'll be proposed. That will actually be constructed as part of phase 2.
That was not the question I was asking. I'm talking about the walkway that goes to the elevator.
Oh, will that be enclosed?
Yes.
There will be
You talk about this walkway right
Yeah.
here? That's an open, it's a covered structure, but it's open. It's not an enclosed tempered space.
yeah, and you can actually see that in one of the architectural renderings.
Well, it could have been in the architecture, and it could have been glass. I just couldn't tell.
Oh,
There's no glass
Just
in that
okay.
portion of it, no.
I have one other question, and I don't know if this is the right time to raise it. It doesn't matter.
Shoot.
So in Mr. Buss's argument earlier, he was talking about this space, or somebody's argument, I can't remember which, didn't match the blocks setup of the McLaughlin neighborhood as far as, the standard square blocks and all that. Can you name another facility in the McLaughlin neighborhood that does not meet that requirement as well? Because I can. The
Well, I think
Oregon
that
City
comes
High School Jackson campus is a prime example of one that, sits on much larger spaces.
I believe the library does too, doesn't it?
that's a full dedicated part of the block.
Yeah.
That was
Commissioner Iden.
I have a question about the trail. Did you say, I read in the packet somewhere that there is a trail that's going to take walkers, pedestrians from the upper yard to the lower yard? Can you kind of point?
Sure.
It just-
So if you follow my laser pointer.
Yeah.
So from the Center Street, there'll be a new staircase that bridges the 41-foot height differential between Center Street and the upper yard. All of this will be outside of the security perimeter, and then it will stay outside and it will cross in front of the gated access and then come here to the historic John Adams alignment. And then this will be an improved trail that will get you to Waterboard Park Road. So the asphalted portions of Waterboard Park Road, they are right about there. So it should connect to that. So that'll be a trail improvement. And then this area here outside of Waterboard Park proper on the upper yard property will be new. And then here you'll still have access off of John Adams Street with the new dedicated parking, and then access into Waterboard Park proper through the old Waterboard Park Road.
So would you say that the trail that has been discussed by citizens that's currently existing to get them down into downtown, would you say that they can still do that when this is built out?
So the connectivity will be a new pattern, but it will still be accessible.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they'll still be able to utilize Waterboard Park Road to get to the new improved trail, to come here and connect into Center Street. So if wherever you're trying to get to is on this side of Center Street, it's a different route, but it's still the same connection.
Yeah, okay.
You can also use the new staircase and come down to Center Street right here and come across.
Commissioner Mangelberg?
So you've provided a great bit of information on the two-story office building. Are similar materials and similar design standards envisioned for some of the other new buildings that you're looking at?
on the two-story?
Yeah, they're all compatible, all using the same palette of materials. And we even though we were not submitting a detailed development plan for the lower level, we actually went and designed and rendered those so that to show that those two will be compatible in style and material. But yes, the only thing that won't be is the fleet shop, which is in the armory, and we're not proposing any new cladding of that building. But yes, all of the materials will be compatible throughout the other structures.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So can I get back to the other? All right, so now we're on to public testimony. And I'll remind folks that you probably know me pretty well by now that we stick to our timelines. So if there are people that are wishing to testify, and this is limited to those who participated in the HRB commission decision, right?
Thank you. Yes.
And are not active appellants. So do we have anybody, Katie?
Yes, we have.
Well, I'm not on my packet, so here we go.
They're right here. Trent.
I'm waiting to get back to, I gotta get on the floor so I can see him. Okay, then we have Trent Premore and Kristen Arnett. Come on in.
So Trent is on the list. Yes.
And Kristen can come up.
Kristen, you wanna come up?
Oh, you want me to come with him?
Sure.
Okay.
That's fine. It just takes less time to call people up two at a time.
Just feels more
No
comfortable to
problem.
have somebody else here.
So I remind you have 3 minutes.
Look, my name is Trent Premore. I'm property owner on South First and Center Street.
Okay.
And I was involved in that. I sent in a response to the HRB, which you have on record. And repeatedly throughout this process, the Public Works Department has referred to the 7th Street corridor to get its designs for its buildings. However, on page 19 of the design guidelines, it says that they shall not do that, that they will instead blend into the residential fabric of the neighborhood. Now, to get out of that, they were exempted by the HRB because of quote unquote their location on the perimeter of the district. But there's nothing in the HRB guidelines that I know of that have made reference to that as being a valid reason for being exempted from a design guideline. Okay,
Got it?
that's it.
Okay. Kristen?
So I just want to, I think we want to ask, did you participate in the HRB hearing originally?
No, I did not.
So I don't.
We can't take testimony from folks who didn't participate before the HRB, so.
Okay.
Well, I was under the impression that the city council meetings were open to residents of Oregon City and that I could express concern, opinion.
And you could have done that in the public comments timeframe at the
Right.
beginning of the meeting, but now we are in a quasi-judicial public hearing and the rules apply, so I
Okay.
apologize, but
I'm sorry
we can't
about
take
that.
your testimony.
Okay, well, as a concerned resident, I just wanted to have an opportunity to, just support public park space. So
And
thank you.
I appreciate that, and I'm certain you'll have multiple more times chance to talk about this at other venues.
Okay, well, I appreciate this forum and I appreciate all the due diligence everyone has done. So
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
So I don't believe Rita Mills participated either. I asked and she did not. So
Okay.
I've withdrawn her from the list.
So, with that, we are on to
Rebuttals.
rebuttals. So, Mr. Combs?
I have nothing further to rebut.
Thank you. Mr. Buss?
Thank you. I'm going to first renew my objection to the exclusion of people that would like to participate at this stage. Local code is clear, state law is clear. They don't have to have it's not required that they had to participate before the HRB if new evidence is allowed, and it's clear that new evidence should have been allowed.
Well, we disagree on that issue.
Yes. It's not just Ms. Arnett and Ms. Mills, but others that I know that wanted to testify but were unable to, deterred by the notice of appeal saying that they couldn't testify. Mr. Montalvo mentioned the trail connection between Center Street and the Natural Park area. I believe he clarified himself, but just to make sure, that's not part of Phase 1. That's not for your consideration today. That would be Phase 2 if this project gets there. So you can't consider any proposed connection between Center Street and the Natural Park area as a mitigating factor. I also want to raise a concern. I found out after my testimony a few minutes ago with messages that were sent to my cell phone from McLaughlin neighborhood residents who were watching this proceeding at home. And I was informed that when I was attempting to present my posters, that the recording device had been showing me from the front, and the first few images that I was trying to show were viewable, but then the video switched to my back, so you couldn't see the majority of what I was presenting. I was informed by the same person that the discussion about whether new evidence was allowed or not, the screen went blank during that discussion. And I'm concerned about preservation of the record. So if the video wasn't working during a portion of my testimony, I would object to that as failure to preserve the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Montalvo.
Could you bring up my presentation, please?
Yes. Sorry. Just give me a second.
This slide, please. Thank you. So to clarify, everything that you see here in the upper yard above the 41-foot elevational change between the lower yard and the upper yard is going to be constructed as components of Phase 1.
Including the trail?
The portions above the bluff connecting into Waterboard Park here will be constructed as portions of Phase 1.
But not the staircase going down.
The staircase bridging this area will not be constructed until we approach the Phase 2 component, where we actually start making room space and the construction logistics to make this feasible.
Would the elevator be constructed as part of
The elevator is part of Phase 1. Okay.
And is that for ADA access purposes?
Staff, primarily for deliveries, still have to be done on Center Street. So it's intended for staff. It's not necessarily for ADA access. Anyone coming to visit us, access will always be accessible through either of the gated areas during daylight hours. And we have ample ADA access for parking and accessibility for the building that's programmed.
So will there be any restriction for regular traffic when the gates are open?
At this point, we're proposing to evaluate that as we start moving forward and what we're facing. If it becomes an impediment to our day-to-day operations, then we'll close one of the gates as needed. But initially, we're going to evaluate it and see if it's something we can just leave open and let pass-through traffic go through.
Okay.
But it's not something that we've determined at this stage.
All right.
Do you anticipate that that would be closed in the evenings after
Yes.
hours? Yeah, because it's within a gated area.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
you've got all kinds of vehicle storage.
Yes, no, I understand that.
Any other questions? All right, I thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, so now we're on to discussion and decision, right?
I think that's right. I think we close the public hearing.
So I will close the public hearing. And
Katie, if you put up the motion options?
Yes.
be happy to hear anything
Or any questions?
anyone has to say.
I want to go back to the trail. I think it's really important that if this were to be approved, that the trail, that there's some kind of a connection in phase one. I just didn't realize that it was phase two only. And even if it was something just real rough, but if there was some way that we could include a trail from that parkland area that would connect with the area that Martin just showed us, it's just something that.
You mean to get down to Center Street?
Mm-hmm. For the residents that are up on the bluff.
Commissioner Hyde.
Yeah.
So right now, pedestrians can walk up what's basically Center Street. So the drive aisle that people use to get to the upper yard and drive through the yard, that will still exist. And the trail that you're talking about, I think, is the one that takes you from the roadway and puts you into Waterboard Park, right? So I don't have the pointer, but that area near where our gate is now, is there a pointer? Thank you. So you're concerned about making sure a pedestrian can do, right now pedestrians can't, there's no way for pedestrians to get anywhere from here up to here unless they use Center Street. And it's, it's tight access. So, but they will still be able to come up to this roadway, they'll be able to get on this trail, and they'll be able to get into the park.
Okay.
Okay.
Commissioner Mayweather, you got anything?
Maybe to make a.
You have anything else, Commissioner Hyde?
No, not at the moment.
Okay, so I'm going to fall back on my standard argument, and that is that generally speaking, and this is true probably 99% of the time, the City Commission relies on, especially the HRB and the Planning Commission, to do the heavy lifting and to go through all the documents and to, substantially debate a proposal and then to make a decision, because that's what they're supposed to do. And it's a very rare case indeed that the City Commission would overturn a decision by either the HRB or the Planning Commission. And in the last instance, it was pretty clear that an error was made. So in this instance, I don't see anything, nobody's pointed to anything to me that the HRB made a bad decision, made an illegal decision. And I know for a fact, because we actually had to change policies for our boards and commissions to not go till midnight, that this was debated through 2 meetings before it reached a decision. So beyond some compelling reason, and I see nothing that is in the record, I would not vote to approve the appeal. So does somebody want to make a motion?
I move tentative denial of the appeals submitted by Charles Coombs and the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association Planning File AP 17-01 and AP 17-02, thereby approving Planning File HR 17-04 as approved by the HRB, and continuing the matter with a closed record to April 4th, 2018 for adoption of findings consistent with this decision.
Second.
Say, before we move on from there, I want to ask Ms. Richter a question. I want to make sure we're still on sound legal footing, that we interpret our code to say that in these decisions, once that only testimony and stuff that was in the record at the HRB at their hearings can be brought forward on appeal.
I believe that the commission has the discretion to have made a decision to open the record relying on that code section that the appellants raised, or could decide not to. This is just a question of interpretive discretion, and I believe you exercised it.
Okay, and customarily, over the years, this is how we've been doing the process, correct?
That is correct.
All right, thank you. Is there any further discussion?
No.
Call the roll.
Commissioner Ide?
Aye.
Commissioner Mengelberg?
Aye.
Mayor Holliday?
Aye. I lost my agenda. Okay, so we have PC 18-032, request for continuance to March 21st, 2018, AP 17-0006, appeal of Planning Commission approval of planning file CP 17-002, 0003, and 0004, including request to waive or otherwise not impose the appeal fee. Ms. Turway.
Thank you. I have nothing to add to that other than for that introduction, other than that the record is still closed on this item. We're just asking for an appeal. As you remember, you made a tentative decision and we'll come back with those final findings for you to adopt. We just need a bit more time.
Oh, okay. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the requested continuance to March 21st.
To March 21st. Second the motion.
Call roll.
Commissioner Ide?
Aye.
Commissioner Mengelberg?
Aye.
Mayor Holliday?
Aye. Anybody want to pull anything from the consent agenda? Hold it. Yeah, sorry, missed that one. So 18-125, resolution number 18-06, supporting the National Park System and encouraging Congress to address maintenance needs. Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. At the request of Commission, I bring before you a resolution to support the National Park Service and a request from Congress support of providing appropriate means of providing for deferred maintenance backlogs and appropriate maintenance needs within the National Park Service. As you're aware, we're an important site within not only Oregon, but the entire western states in providing cultural and historic resources. One of our properties just across the street from this location, the McLaughlin House and the Barclay House, are National Park Service locations. And with this resolution, we ask that you support providing appropriate funds for the $12 billion deferred maintenance backlog nationally, as well as the $105 million deferred maintenance backlog in the state of Oregon.
Move to approve resolution number 18-06, supporting the National Park System.
Second.
For discussion, call a roll.
Commissioner Ide?
Aye.
Commissioner Mengelberg?
Aye.
Mayor Holliday?
Aye. Anybody want to pull anything from the consent agenda?
Nope.
Nope.
Okay.
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Second.
Sorry. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Ide?
Aye.
Commissioner Mengelberg?
Aye.
Mayor Holliday?
Aye. Mr. Manager.
I don't have any updates tonight other than we are not going to hold any of the advertised executive sessions after this hearing tonight.
Okay.
They're both canceled.
Commissioner Ide, do you have anything?
I do.
You've become our Rocky Smith, I want you to know.
Well, it's position
Full
2.
of great information.
Sorry, it came too fast. Oh, here it is. Okay. So I did attend a West Water Environmental Services Forum for elected officials a week or so ago, along with the mayor here, and shared our concern that cities do not have a voice on the decision-making board for that, for the sewer district. And it appears that we're going to be moving forward with some kind of mediation services to have that discussion further. So that's where that's at this point. I also was invited to and accepted to be on the county's policy and task force for affordable housing and homelessness. And its purpose is the development of affordable housing for all income levels, to recommend funding for the same, and to recommend long-term oversight. So I'm pretty excited about this. They haven't quite got all their members together yet, but it's a temporary task force, and it will be approximately 15 months in length, with some good things projected to be resolved in the end. And then also attended the Equitable Housing Citizen Group meeting last night, where we talked quite a bit about housing types for our 2 zones. It was a great meeting. That's it.
Good.
Last Friday, I attended a Metro Regional Transportation Forum, which was the fourth and final of the series, where our region-wide leaders got together and talked about transportation needs, looking forward to some kind of a bond measure or funding measure to help address some of the pressing congestion and traffic needs in the region. And there was clearly a lens of equity and safety that was the primary concern among the leaders there. So those will be components of whatever comes forward. So more to come on that over time. And then tomorrow morning, I'm delighted to serve on the Blue Ribbon Task Force for the Beaver Creek Road Employment Committee Council. Blue Ribbon Committee to look at how we can promote that area for future employment.
I won't be able to be there tomorrow. So I attended the West Elected Forum. I think basically the 5 cities have made it clear to the county that the current form of governance is not acceptable, and that we're going to have to find a different way to govern the 2 service districts moving forward, to give the cities an actual voice in the governance and rate setting structures. So we're moving forward with a series of meetings, hopefully that will be moderated by Oregon Consensus, which is a division of the Governor's Regional Solutions Office. And so these are the guys that somehow managed to moderate a deal for water in the Klamath Basin. So, you know, if you could do that, I think they could probably get this other thing done. And I've attended some other private meetings with different development interests as I continue to try to move things forward in the city in several different locations. And hopefully some of those will start to bear fruit fairly soon. Beyond that, that's about it. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Then we're adjourned.